are working in concert with UCR, EPIC, our SBDC, and also the Office of Technology Partnerships. And our mission is to catalyze university research into commercializable innovations and so forth. We work very closely with region business opportunities as well to guide innovative ideas as well into new opportunities that can be commercialized into the real world. We spend a lot of time on capitalization, commercialization, new innovations, and the formation of strategic partnerships and anything else that comes into play to help you move forward and develop your new technology. And as Misty has already indicated, we have a keen interest in SBIR, STTR, and related grant and proposal funding support. So hence our meeting with you today. We're going to be brief. We only have an hour. And we have a part 1 today and a part 2 next Wednesday. What we're going to be covering today at a pretty high level, given that we do just have an hour, and in fact I'm planning on maybe chatting for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for about 15 or 20 minutes thereafter for Q&A. If we do not have a chance to answer your question for whatever reason, we are available for follow-on correspondence with you, so don't despair. We're going to talk about an introduction orientation, again, at a high level about SBIR and STTR program, but I also want us to spend some dedicated time to matters relating to funding opportunities for COVID-19 as well. And we'll discuss opportunities that are now being provided and requests for proposals from the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and BARDA, B-A-R-D-A, which stands for Biomedical Research and Development Authorization, and so forth. Next week, we're going to go into a little bit further detail with regard to what the reviewers are looking for in terms of the optimizing the caliber of your application, and we're going to be concentrating on areas that we feel are the ones that are probably the greatest stumbling blocks between your success and being rejected. So stay tuned, and I hope to see you next week as well. Typically what I like to do is, for mostly humanitarian reasons, you don't want to hear me yakking the whole time. And so if you would like to jump in with a question, please feel free to do so. I absolutely love it, and there's no pride in authorship if you have a different take on something, or if you have experiences that might be of help to us, that would be absolutely terrific and fully embraced. On the other hand, we do only have about 45 minutes to an hour, so we'll have to keep that somewhat under control. So why don't we revisit the basics first. SBIR and STTR are highly competitive opportunities. Federal agencies have specific topics that they have a great interest in, and we have an opportunity to participate in that research. Every year, the Congress budgets or mandates a certain percentage of extramural research that they authorize on a per agency basis, and we as small business concerns for SBIRs are able to compete for 3.2% of that extramural research. And for small STTR, which is Small Business Technology Transfer, there are 5 agencies that have budgets in excess of $1 billion. And so in addition to SBIR, there are what are called STTRs. The distinguishing characteristics between the two is that we are required to form a collaborative research initiative with not-for-profit research entities. That includes universities and federal agencies and so forth. So there's 11 of them. 12 if you break up Department of Commerce into the NIST and the National Oceanic, tough to pronounce, Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. And the 5 check marks that you see there are the agencies that have budgets in excess of $1 billion. And those are the ones that offer STTR programs in addition to SBIR. These are research projects. They are early stage, deemed high risk, that if you did not get the support from the federal government, then you might not be able to get the funding from early stage angel investors as a result of that, but high opportunity for payback as well. And also, these are considered increasingly, and they're actually touting themselves as our seed fund ever since we encountered the Great Recession in 2008. Some angel investors have disengaged until they see further evidence of efficacy, feasibility, and proof of concept. And so that's the job of these 11 agencies in order to fund us, in order to answer those critical questions. And those are what the numbers look like. Not bad, all things considered. And I believe that for fiscal year 2021, those numbers are going to go up for a couple of reasons. Number one, as a result of the COVID-19 situation and prospective recession that will be coming down the pike. And so the federal government and Congress are planning to increase these funds, which is good news, I hope, for most of us here, to help us reinvigorate the economy and so forth, and also for small business concerns such as most of you out there, I believe. It should be a good opportunity for you to compete. The Department of Education and EPA are under a little bit of challenge from the White House and under duress right now, but I think that there's going to be a rebound there as well. HHS, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, NASA, and also USDA, I anticipate those numbers are going to go up for next year. All things considered, the phase 1 success rates are not bad, you know, when you compare it to angel investment opportunities and so forth. So the average across the board is ballpark around 16, 17, or 18%. And there is a phenomenon that I think that is occurring, and as a result of COVID-19 and what may be prospectively that dreaded recession, these success rates may actually increase. Now, what that may also mean is that the success rate for those who compete for phase 2 efficacy, those success rates, unfortunately, may prospectively go down. And we'll chat about that a little bit further. So here are the general characteristics. For phase 1, these are proof of concept and feasibility studies. And the aim there is to do studies enough to determine whether or not you actually have a technology or an innovation that may have a chance for commercialization success. But in addition to that, this is also a sniff test by way of the funding agencies to determine whether or not you are the right folks and your company is the right one and your technology is worthy of being transitioned into phase 2, where proof of efficacy comes into play, and whether you can handle or not a much larger amount of money in order to proceed further. Overall, for phase 2, we can actually get up to anywhere between $3.5 million and $5 million, as there are certain agencies, National Institutes of Health and Department of Energy, and so forth, that offer supplemental and sequential funding. And what that means is supplemental funding can be in the category of match funding, where if we are at the completion or nearing the completion of promised deliverables for the reason why we were funded in the first place, if we can secure private equity or form a strategic partnership with a corporation, they will actually match that contribution of the private equity investment or deliver additional funding to support the collaboration with an industry partner. In addition to that, supplemental funding may be offered to incent or motivate universities or not-for-profit research institutions or corporations to come into play and perform additional research in concert with you. So these are all in the name of providing as much support as possibly can be delivered to you in order to heighten your chances for success in commercialization. So all in all, pretty good stuff. We don't get funded for commercialization, but we do with certain agencies have an opportunity to proceed after phase 2 into contractual relationships with agencies in the federal government, where in fact we will be compensated for the performance of those projects. So to be eligible, we have to be for-profit small business concerns, no more than 500 employees. So I think most of us, if not all of us, qualify for that. And I've received a lot of questions in terms of whether green card and resident aliens will qualify. In many respects, yes. In certain respects, no. For certain critical NIH and Department of Defense projects. And the definition, by the way, for those of you who did not know that, a resident alien is anyone who has resided in the United States for a specific amount of time, 31 days in the current year, 183 days over the past 3 years. So it's actually what I consider to be a fairly light requirement. Now, what do we mean by 50% employed? It isn't really employing as much as it is dedicated or focused on the proposed project from the time of delivery of the funds through the completion of the last deliverable. After that, you can, the person who is the principal investigator can move on, or if you fall in love with each other, you can certainly stay together to move forward with other projects as well, or actually become a true employee of the company. Now for the STTR, which is collaborative relationships and so forth, pretty much similar requirements, less than or equal to 500 employees, and these include, by the way, affiliates, organized for profit. The distinguishing characteristic here is that we are required to collaborate, again, with the university or some other not-for-profit institutional partner for the purposes of research. We do need to form an IP sharing agreement, and most, if not all, research universities actually have a template. But you, as the CEO or founder of your organization, would be encouraged also, of course, to seek your own legal counsel. Company needs to perform, that is you, 40 to 70%, and your not-for-profit research collaborative partner anywhere from 30 to 60%. And I believe that leaves an additional 30% for you to bring in additional research partners in order to perform the work. Now, in this particular case, the PI does not need to be an individual dedicated expressly to your organization, and more often than not, the PI that comes from the not-for-profit. And in fact, for most of the projects, or at least up to 65 or 75% of the time, I may end up working with you to fortify or enhance the research involvement or investigators in your initiative in order to enhance your credibility and qualifications, and by extension, chances for actually getting successful awards.
Martin,
So yeah, registration
Martin,
can.
I have a question.
Yeah, fire away.
Yeah, from the group. Is it green card and substantial presence, or green card or?
Or.
Okay.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So yeah, and so there have been several who have qualified by way of resident alien. And in fact, I just got a question on that morning by coincidence. So it is not and, it is or. Okay, so here's our bugaboo here, registration. And it's sequential. Start with DUNS and then to proceed to SAM, and the reason why it has to be sequential is because you have to insert your DUNS number into your SAM application. Now, SAM has become a little bit of a bugaboo for us. Too long ago, a couple of years ago, some near-deals from a foreign discovered a way to tap into SAM and get the money that ordered us and deposit it in their own bank accounts in Ukraine or somewhere else. That apparently was MIFIM awardees. Can't blame them. So the system has actually taken several actions, by the way. The one that we need to submit manually a notarized letter before receipt of awards that indicate that we are indeed the person who is the head of the small business concern and so forth, and indeed is authorized and credentialed to receive the SBIR awards. Note below, however, that to enhance SAM's security, we're going to be replacing the DUNS number active in December of 2020 with called the Unique Entity Identifier. It's going to replace DUNS. And so we are applying for SAM right now, those of you where you have to insert your DUNS number, it is going to be replaced with a UEI that you have to apply for as your DUNS registration. And on a per agency basis, there are certain requisites for registration for some and other requisites for registration for others. I can't emphasize enough that if you haven't registered, the second that you hang up from this webinar, start your registration process. It does indeed take 6 to 8 weeks. SAM, especially the longest. They say 3, plan on 5 to 6 weeks. It's just kind of a hassle. And with everything that's going on back there in Washington, D.C., plan on taking a little bit longer than either you and I would actually hope for. So what exactly is important for these agencies? Well, it's pretty much the same. The columns look a little bit longer, but when you think about it, they're looking for pretty much the same information from you. What I call deal killers are the commercialization plan and the study approach. The study approach has to be rigorous and repeatable and scalable. And for those of us who have not been formally trained in designing research and managing research, that can be a tough one to deal with. On the other hand, for those of us who have never put together a high caliber commercialization plan, that also can be a very, very difficult area to tackle. These are two areas that we at the OTP and the and EPIC and Misty's group, we spend a great deal of time with those with whom we work in order to make certain that the content, your study approach, your objectives, your aims, your study methods, your tasks, your statistical analytics, and endpoints and so forth are all complying with grantmanship requirements. Keep in mind that these are, for the most part, academicians who are reviewing these, so they are very demanding that this is done absolutely correctly. Team credentials, very, very important, and as I indicated previously, for the most part, I'd say 60 to 75% of the time, I'm probably going to end up having a conversation with you if I deem that it's necessary to fortify the team for qualification purposes. Okie doke.
Martin, I
Yes.
have one question going back to the registration. Does
Yeah.
the UEI registration have an expiration date?
One does a which one? Yeah, we have to renew every year.
Okay.
If that was that the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, every year we need to renew it. We need to renew it now, every year for SAM, and likewise is going to be the case for the UEI. Thanks for asking. Okay, so we're going to blast through these. The National Institutes of Health has reviewer requisites in terms of how they evaluate evaluate our proposals. And there are 5 criteria that they are tasked setting store by. And for any of you who have ever applied and received reviewer commentary, and this is the same as generally the case for the National Science Foundation, albeit they are not scored, but this is a scoring process here. So every area of or section of your proposal, title, abstract, all the way through, is evaluated based upon those 5 criteria. Significance in terms of whether or not it may be tantamount to maybe a paradigm changer or changing how we look at prevailing state-of-the-art research, how we perform the research, and so forth. Innovation is typically something that is relative to the state-of-the-art. It changes the way we do something, how we deliver clinical care, how we save energy or generate new energy. Study, which I've already talked about, extremely important, research design and how we manage it, and whether or not we've got the team with the right stuff. Environment stands for the facilities that we have, the equipment, and the capacity to a location, a venue, to where we can actually perform the work that we are proposing to do. Now, about overall impact, this is not a sum of the above criteria, but it is a separate determination on whether or not what we are proposing for funding actually presents with a likelihood for that particular project to have a sustained, powerful influence on not only the research fields performed, but how we actually behave once that technology or that innovation actually lands in the marketplace. It's pretty rigorous. It's a 2-step process, and as I indicate, we submit, and it is evaluated by a precursor group of 3 reviewers who will evaluate our proposal based upon that 5 criteria that I had referenced earlier. If it passes a sniff test, it goes on to an advisory council board to make the final determination on whether we are a go or a no-go for funding. So it's a 2-step process, very rigorous, very competitive. They do set great store by all of them, in particular some agencies over another for that commercialization plan. So I can't underscore enough how important that is. And we at OTP, SBIR, and SBDC, we spend a considerable amount of time working with you to make certain that we address all of these issues. And for those of you who do not know, agencies now speak something called ICOR. And UC Riverside is an important and vital ICOR site for the interests of not just the National Science Foundation, but also for other agencies who also implement and evaluate ICOR, National Institutes of Health, USDA, and the Department of Energy as well. So very, very important stuff. So I mentioned the scoring system already, and I'm just going to march right through this. Low score wins. These scores here that you see over in that second column multiplied by 10. If you get in the area of the mid-20s and so forth, the odds of you getting funded are pretty good. If your scores are 30 or higher, it gets a little bit iffy. Probably you're not going to get funded. You'll get a response back from the reviewer study section for areas you have your strengths and areas where you have your weaknesses and so forth. We have an opportunity to resubmit by addressing those areas that they deem to be weaknesses on our part. And if we do that properly and appropriately and acknowledge respectfully, then our chances of getting award by way of second submission are probably a little bit better. Okay, so many of you who have received NIH awards, you are surprised to see that maybe 2 NIH reviewers are looking in one direction and another is thinking in another direction. As we have human beings evaluating our application. applications, you're going to get different opinions. And that just simply is the way things occur. Now, I know you're looking at the screen and thinking of a vision of the body snatchers, but what I'm really trying to present here is the sharing of knowledge, advancement, and so forth. The National Science Foundation evaluates the proposals we submit to them, also very rigorous, very, very competitive, but they set great store by those areas that we need to pay attention to, and we work very, very closely with you on each one of those key criteria areas. There's a new way of submitting an application to the National Science Foundation of recent vintage. And yeah, go ahead.
Interrupt. I just want a quick question. Someone has a company that their organization already has a commercially viable product.
Yep.
Enables innovation in a number of ways. Does that still apply to SBIR, STTR?
It assuredly does. You do not, and that's a terrific question. Glad you asked it, because I forgot to mention it. You do not need to be a startup. Remember the eligibility requirements being up to 500 employees. You can be an established revenue generating company with customers if you have a technology which you can be innovative, or in fact, it may not be innovative in the sense of the pure definition of it, but if it adds value, if it enhances the quality of our well-being, if it adds to scientific knowledge, that's okay. So yeah, you will still qualify. So don't misconstrue this as just simply being applicable to smart individuals with a great idea. If you have an established business enterprise, you are still qualified to submit a proposal.
Thank you.
Did I answer that well enough? Sounds like yes. Okay, so what we have to do now, the National Science Foundation has been flooded with applications, of them, unfortunately, that really are not of caliber enough to get funded. So the National Science Foundation decided what we're going to do is that we're going to ask you to submit a project pitch to us first. And the project pitch is presented in 4 categories. You submit it online, and you need to address certain questions which pertain to these 4 topics. Now, interestingly enough, project pitches, for the most part, I have rarely seen a project pitch that has been denied. Maybe some of you have experienced that. I think what the issue that we're facing with here is that all of our colleagues back in Arlington, Virginia, program directors and so forth, are still absolutely slammed with proposals and project pitches and so forth. As long as it looks fairly reasonable, and if it appears as though, well, maybe you will submit a high caliber research proposal, they'll let you take a pass and move forward. So most of us are receiving clearance from the program director. Also, another distinguishing characteristic that just came into play for the National Science Foundation is that there are not any more drop-dead deadline submissions, such as a particular date at 5 o'clock. There are 4 windows where we can submit a project pitch. And likewise is the case, by the way, the proposals that follow that project pitch once we receive authorization to do so. These are 4 windows of opportunity. So we are now in the 2nd window, March through June 4. And for anyone who works with me, more often than not, if you approach me, say today, April, depending upon the status of your work and where you stand right now, I will probably respectfully and lovingly encourage you to target the 3rd window and so forth. And there are reasons to do that. We're all in for quality, not for speed. Okay? Great. So that was a 30,000-foot level overview of something that Misty and I may take 3 or 4 or 6 hours to work with you. So we probably have not addressed topics that are of germane interest to you. So we are encouraging you, if you wish, to reach out to us, and we'll be very, very happy to work with you or address any other key questions that I did not cover. And I promise you, I did not cover 90% of the critical components of these SBIR and STTR proposals. But I wanted to spend the remainder of our time on the matter of what we're all encountering and why we're confined to our homes here in California, elsewhere in the country, and that's COVID-19. So on the 25th of March, the National Science Foundation issued something called a Dear Colleague letter. And it was an invitation to submit a proposal for what you feel might be a solution to enable us all and the National Science Foundation researchers to better understand and deal with the COVID-19 crisis. And these are the areas of their research interest, and it is broadly based. Now, some of you I know with whom I have worked have submitted project pitches relative to these particular areas, and you have been categorized or classified in an area, one of those areas of research interest that you feel is not exactly appropriate for you. Don't sweat it. We can always reach out to the program director and have you reclassified. So that is not an issue. You still have to go through the same process. You got to go through the same protocol as if you were submitting a normal proposal for phase 1 or otherwise. And that is, you still have to submit a project pitch following the same process that I had referenced earlier. And we're very, very happy, of course, to work with you on the content and timing of the project pitch, how to submit it, and so forth. So that is still required. When you submit your project pitch, however, you have to include COVID-19 as the topic area, and you have to reference in that 4-part project pitch COVID-19, and you need to reference the Dear Colleague letter, NSF 20-065 as well, in the Describe the Technology Innovation field. There is your link right down there that I would encourage you to tap into. So time is of the essence, of course. We are in hyperspeed mode. So you submit through FastLane, and for those of you who have experienced applying for NSF, same as usual, FastLane. You do need to follow the specific solicitation guidelines, and you do need to include COVID-19 in your title. The good or bad news, depending upon your perspective, is that it's not going to be a full-on project description of 15 pages. It's down to 9 pages. For some of us, that makes life easier. For others, trying to describe our innovative project in 9 pages makes life a little bit more challenging and daunting than it may have been in the past. You have to have an active registration. You got to go through that same protocol or not. So if you have not registered, full steam ahead. 1 minute after we hang up from our meeting here, start the registration process. And it still takes a long time to do that. It can take weeks. So that's going to be a little bit of a bugaboo for those of you who have not already registered. Okay, they will evaluate your proposal the same rigorous way that they evaluate all of the other ones. There is the merit review criteria that I had shared with you in a previous slide. Take a look at the review guidelines and very carefully make certain that you comply with those and that you also meet the merit review criteria. Very important. The aim is for all of the awards to get back to you, however, and this will be terrific news, 6 weeks. But it's not just terrific news, it's important news because we want you to move forward on the research and completion of your deliverables as quickly as you reasonably can to demonstrate feasibility and concept, and then move forward immediately thereafter for efficacy. We will work with you on this. One of the areas that Misty and I and other EIRs do with you is that we pay very, very particular and demanding involvement on the content of your proposal. This is very, very important. So I had mentioned team, I had mentioned study approach, I had mentioned commercialization plan. So we will go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with you to ensure to the best of our ability that the proposal that you eventually submit is of enough caliber that your chances of getting awarded are optimized. So now here is another area, and this is the National Institutes of Health. They have issued funding opportunities as well. There are 11 of them. Many of us may not qualify, however, because these are areas of research only for the most part, and there are a few exceptions, but only for the most part for those who have already been awarded a phase 1 grant from the National Institutes of Health. So these are all called notices of special interest. And I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what they look like, but I would encourage you to take a look at each one of those, visit them, and see whether or not you might be appropriate for submitting a proposal to them. But again, I must emphasize that these are deemed to be dedicated to those who have already been awarded. They have active grants. For some of them, such as the National Institute of Aging here and the National Institute of Mental Health, extensions are not allowed. And so these are very specific. So expirations, by the way, can be short-lived. So in this particular one, it is a matter of weeks away, May 1. This is not the case for all of the NOCs, but it is the case for the NIA and the NIMH as well. They are accepted on a rolling basis, first in, first out considered. So but nevertheless, don't go for speed, with the exception of knowing that you need to deal with the deadline of May the 1st here. The period of award to get the study done is 1 year. Here's another example of human genome, and by giving you these two examples, I'm just simply giving you examples representing what may, for the most part, be the case for the 11 that I had listed earlier. Expiration date is a little bit further out. It's May the 16th. Again, however, these are for existing grants, administrative supplements, urgent competitive revision, and again, the grants need to be active. Budget in this particular case for genome research is an additional $250,000. However, if you can justify and argue the case that you need more money than that, then included in your proposal should be an argument and a justification for a budget which is greater than $250,000. Same story as the NIA and the NIMH, accepted on a rolling basis. A first in, first out. Period of award is 1 year. I wanted to introduce you also to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, because here, and there are others who actually have an expiration date of beyond 2020 into the first or second quarter of 2021. Again, it is urgent competitive revision to existing grants, but I believe that there are additional opportunities to submit as long as you have made advanced progress on your initiative, that you have been doing work, you have existing data, you have some evidence that demonstrates that you do have concept and feasibility and may be able to move forward in a fairly accelerated basis for proving efficacy, they may be willing to consider that the research strategy is 6 pages, rolling basis, 2 years in this particular case, for obvious reasons given the expiration date as well. For all of these, however, and I think there's a question coming, but I always encourage, no matter what, by the way, this is something that I strongly encourage all of our clients, is that you reach out to program staff first to discuss your research aims in order to make certain that they confirm that your aim is appropriate and they want you to indeed to submit the proposal. Misty, I think you had a question.
A question from the group. Are there any COVID-related NIH awards that are open to those who have not been awarded?
There are a few, and I had referenced the National Institute of Allergies. And, but again, I am suggesting that you or we reach out to the program staff and have a conversation with them. And that's why I was referring to, if you have made progress with your own research internally, you have data that may be germane to their interests, and that you have evidence that indicates that you might be, for example, equivalent to a direct to phase 2, there is a possibility that they may be willing to accept you. But for the most part, what we've seen with these notice of special interest is that these are for current awardees, but there are exceptions. So that's why I'm encouraging you and us to examine all 11 of those NOSIs. And if there are some that you feel that you might be able to argue your case, that even though you have not been presented with an award, that you may be justified in being allowed to submit your proposal. And again, I'm there to help you in the conversation with the program director or the program staff in order to hopefully heighten your chances of getting clearance to do that.
Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, so no surprise to all of you. They're starting to lighten up a little bit with application due dates and so forth. So for those that had a deadline for submission for earlier, you're allowed to submit for a new deadline of May the 1st. Hopefully that's good news for some of you. And the reason for doing that, of course, is that they are being absolutely slammed with COVID-19 and other issues right now, is that even if you had submitted your proposal on time, they would not have had a chance to take a look at it anyway. So that frankly is between all of us, is that they frankly have no choice but to allow you for a late submission date. There are other opportunities as well to get extensions and budget changes and slight revisions to your proposal as a result of what's going on right now as well. Reach out to your program director, have a conversation with him or her, and talk about that. And there are about a half dozen or more leniencies, and we have something that, by the way, that we can send you that will identify what those areas of leniency are. They're frankly bending over backwards on your behalf, but frankly also on their behalf, because they are absolutely being inundated 7/24 in dealing with COVID-19 and a flood of proposals dealing with that. So for those of you who have submitted the traditional proposals, there are leniencies relative to budget, staff, slight changes to proposal, and so forth. And Good. Time's up there. To make it a little bit easier on you. So those are the flexibilities, and those are the links. And by the way, Misty, I think this slide deck is available for everybody. Is that fair to say, or?
Yes, we're going to make it available.
Okay, so I think all you need to do is just send us a request on the back of a $20 bill, and it's the way. I think that's how we typically do it, Misty, if I remember correctly. Okay, so much for the one-liner. Okay, let's tackle something that is of recent vintage as well. And for those of you who might have attended theirs, colleagues of ours from UC Irvine, Molly Schmidt and Richard Krieger, had given an hour talk on this opportunity. And this is an area where you do not need to be an awardee. For those of you who are in the life science area, if you have made progress already, if you are generating revenue, if you have demonstration of efficacy, if you have early data which demonstrates concept and proof, this may be an opportunity for you to reach out to what is called a Tech Watch meeting to have a discussion of what you would like to propose for submission. And I highly encourage you to do that. In fact, anybody who works with me, I highly encourage you to reach out to program directors anyway, because it helps you to refine your proposal in a way that is more appealing to them than might be otherwise the case. So, if you have something that might be appropriate for better understanding and dealing with COVID-19, and if you have completed or accomplished the 4 categories that I've listed here, you've progressed into or beyond non-clinical or preclinical trials. If you have a certified good management practice manufacturing capability, or if you have an approved platform and your concentration is in these areas, then I would encourage you to get onto that link that I showed on the prior slide. Register, log in, submit. It's pretty easy, takes about 10 minutes. But the objective here is to reach out for a Tech Watch meeting with the BARDA folks and have a conversation with them. And in return, and this is something that I highly encourage you to do, is that it's a great way to pollinate. It's a great way to build a relationship. It's a great way to gain visibility and interest on their part. I can assure you that I've done this many, many times on the NIH side, where just simply reaching out to them has resulted in teleconferences, Zoom-type meetings with reviewers to actually talk a little bit further about your technology or your innovation. And unquestionably, it heightens your chances for success. So get feedback from them, hear suggested techniques and strategies, get insight, and then it enables you to prepare a formal proposal which takes into account everything that you learned from them, and it definitely enhances your chances of getting an award. So for humanitarian reasons, why don't I stop talking? And for the duration of the time, perhaps we can answer some questions, hopefully. And then afterwards, I'd like to introduce you very, very briefly to specialists within the Office of Technology Partnerships for EPIC, SBDC, and so forth, and to provide you with our contact information. So I'll sit back and be prepared to answer questions that I hopefully can for you. If I cannot answer your question for whatever reason, I promise you I will get to you within 24 hours with the answer to that. So, anybody have questions?
I'll throw out a question. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi.
Hi. My name is Philip Yun. I have a small software business in LA called Black Software.
Yeah.
I was looking at the SBIR website, just looking at the current solicitation, open solicitations, and it seems a lot, less than I thought had expected is 84. And
84 opportunities?
yeah, although
Um,
I guess they're wider, right?
Yeah, well,
More
I
topic
would
areas rather than.
I would propose that you also get on grants.gov, where there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of FOAs. But in addition to that, what did you say you got an SBIR? Or did you get onto an SBIR site for a specific agency?
Yes, actually the latter. So I'm just looking at SBIR.gov. I just did a very quick research and looking at the
Mm.
agencies, DOD is not listed. And I understand DOD is the largest participant in SBIR.
They are indeed. I would encourage you to not get on SBIR.gov in this particular case. I would encourage you to get on the DoD website expressly for SBIR, and likewise for any of the other agencies, and you will get much more specific information and in greater quantity. I
Oh,
suggest doing it that way.
I see. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, that'll help.
Okay.
Misty, did we chase everybody else away? And I can't blame them if we did.
One question
Yeah,
for the NSF COVID-19 page length, can it not exceed 9 pages?
I would highly encourage you to not exceed 9 pages.
I wanted to add for the NSF, I don't know if many of you sat on the NSF webinar, but for the project pitch, you know, they're encouraging everyone to submit it, and
Yep.
and they are looking to actually get back on the project pitches within, they hope, 5 days. So if you have a technology that's, you know, in the COVID research area, it would be worth your while to submit a project pitch, in my opinion.
Well, you have to. For the National Science Foundation, it's mandatory. And the good news for us, I suppose, is that they are actually responding back in 24 to 48 hours.
Great.
Now, the bad news is that they are so inundated with project pitches, is that if it appears as though yours looks like it is reasonable, realistic, they're going to send you back something that says go for it.
Okay.
That doesn't mean your chances of getting awarded are any greater. It's just that things are just unfortunately crazy back there in Arlington, Virginia, and they are just totally slammed. But get it in. And get it in without having completed registration. Just get it in, and then continue with your registration activities.
All right, we have another question regarding, you know, we had mentioned that a university partner was needed. Is that only for STTR?
It is only for STTR, but however, for those of you who work with me, the chances are 65% of the time, I might propose working with a not-for-profit, such as a university, unless your background is such that you have the qualifications and the caliber to pull it off. This is your decision as the founder and the entrepreneur and the principal investigator. This does not take you away from being the PI. But if I feel that we need to add some additional researchers who have a background and have the qualifications to do so, I may propose it to you and work with you to find that individual. So even with SBIRs, 65% of the time at a minimum, we may end up working with a researcher at a university somewhere around the country, hopefully UC Riverside.
Another question, for SBIR, how flexible, strict are the qualification requirements on the individual, such as PhD prior publications? And can an application be strengthened by a consulting arrangement with a more highly qualified PI? Or would STTR be a more viable path?
No, the SBIR is fine. You do not need to have one of those lofty PhD type degrees. You do need to have experience and credentials in the space. Your study approach is absolutely critical, as is your commercialization plan. What I meant by referring you prospectively to work with perhaps a university researcher is often based upon a gut decision on my part after you and I have a conversation together and we discuss a little bit further, or I may see documents that you have given to me and then we'll make a judgment call there. But you do not need to work with a university researcher. It's only something that I may or may not recommend for you.
Hey, Martin, this is Bob Parker. Can I chime in with a question?
Yes.
Sure, Bob. Yeah.
Great. Just two things, really. So I'm new to the SBIR and STTR process. I'd like you to comment on two things. You know, engaging with you and sort of what the best way to go about doing that is. I represent a software company out of Boston, and we feel we have an innovative value to bring to some of this COVID-19 and other programs as well. So I'd like you to comment on just engaging with you and your team. In addition, my research into this space, you know, I guess one of the requirements that I thought was fairly strict was, you know, an abstract for phase 1 is almost like a 250-word document. And then in other places I've seen several other kind of response formats required or requested. Can you give me some guidance on sort of what these SBIR phase 1 responses typically look like, or are they all over the board depending on the issuer?
First of all, with regard to the first question, Misty, perhaps you can answer that with regard to the process for reaching out to us and building a relationship. I'll leave it up to you, Misty, if you wouldn't mind. And
Sure.
then I'll address the second one.
As far as reaching out, you can just shoot me an email, but there is a process to sign up as a client for our SBDC. It's a very simple online process with a few questions about your company. That's all that's really needed to become part of our program. And from there, once you sign up, then one of us, probably me, will give you a call to just ask you some questions, and then you get assigned a mentor like Martin or an entrepreneur in residence for assistance. But in general, just feel free to reach out to me to start, and we can discuss all your questions, and I can tell you about the different programs and options available to you.
And we will certainly go into much further detail on each of the areas that we had suggested to you, plus other funding opportunities as well. Now, you had asked about
formatting phase 1 responses.
Yeah, formatting phase 1, yes. So each agency has slightly different proposal guide. Number one, they're eye glazers because they are long and extensive, but they're not as intimidating once you start reading them. The National Science Foundation, as does the NIH, as does Energy, USDA, and all of the 11 agencies have specific questions, specific formats, and structure that they want you to comply with. And they have different portals as well that they would like you to submit the proposal in. So as long as you become familiar with the specific agency's proposal guide and requisites, comply with that. And we, as your mentors, would ensure, in fact, that you would also comply with the structure as well, not to mention the content that is called for within each one of the categories. So yes, there are distinguishing characteristics between agencies, and the structure that they want to submit the proposal. Did that answer your question? I'm not certain if I helped you with that one.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Essentially saying that, yes, there is a lot of variation, which is sort of what I was after.
Yeah, there is variation indeed.
We'll look forward to engaging with you and seeing how we can work together moving forward. Thanks. This has been very helpful and very useful.
Terrific. Yeah, and by the way, you may recall that one slide, even though agencies have different requisites and so forth, they're pretty much asking for the same thing anyway, no matter how you slice it. So where do we stand now, Misty? Maybe I should introduce the principals here. Misty, you've met her, and Misty has been the one who has been quarterbacking us here. She is our head honcho running the SBIR and STTR program here, and I've had the honor to work with her there, and so that's me down below. Feel free to reach out to us. But I wanted to also call your attention to gentleman, Scott Brosby, who runs the Small Business Development Corporation here called EPIC. And he is the individual with whom you would also want to speak with regard to reaching out and becoming registered with the EPIC SBDC, and there is his contact information there. And I also wanted to introduce you to our fearless leader, David Pearson, who is the managing director of the entrepreneurial programs and so forth, proof of concept grants and incubators. And if I were to list all the other stuff that he does, it would take a couple of dozen more slides. So that is our contact there. So this is our core team. And we also, by the way, have several entrepreneurs in residence who are very capable, very experienced with startups, successful liquidity events and so forth, who may also be working with you as you work with us for pursuing SBIR, STTR grants, private equity, and other opportunities for funding as well. So I think I am out of time, and thank you so much for spending your important time with us. Again, this was at a high level, 30,000 foot height to discuss certain programs. So that means it calls for us to take a look a little bit further detail by way of those links that I've included in these slides. Please feel free to consider joining our family and reaching out to us. And I look forward to meeting many of you personally. Misty, did you have anything else to say besides see you later?
No, thank you, Martin. That was great. I think everyone's found this really helpful. Next week, we have another webinar, a part 2, where Martin will be going more in depth on some of the parts of the proposal, what's needed to produce a winning proposal. And then we also will be having more webinars like this in the near future, Q&As, things like that. So please join us. Please also feel free to shoot me an email if you have some area of SBIR you want to learn about, so that way I can know what to include in the upcoming webinars. So thank you, everyone. I'm glad you could join, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Bye for now, everybody.